Welcome, everyone. We'll give it another minute or two as people enter from the waiting room before we get started. All right, I'm seeing 2:32, so I think we can get started now. Welcome, everyone. My name is Courtney Cooperman. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a housing advocacy organizer at NLIHC. Thank you so much for joining us for the kickoff Our Homes, Our Votes 2022 webinar. This webinar is designed to introduce you to the Our Homes, Our Votes campaign and its achievements in past years, our strategy for the 2022 elections, how political participation connects to housing justice, and how you can get involved this year. As a reminder, this webinar is being recorded and the resources will be sent out in an email and made available online later this week. And please submit your questions for our speakers in the Q&A box throughout the call. We also have closed captioning enabled on the webinar. Today, we'll be joined by NLIHC President and CEO, Diane Yentel, to give an overview of the campaign and its achievements in 2020, Georgia ACT President and CEO, Dr. Bambi Hayes Brown, to share about the inspiring election efforts taking place in Georgia, NLIHC Senior Director of Media Relations and Communications, Jen Butler, to discuss the campaign's 2022 communication strategy, and researcher Jillian Slee at Eviction Lab to present on groundbreaking new research connecting eviction rates and voter turnout. And we'll conclude with a special message from Congressman Chuy Garcia about the Our Homes, Our Votes Act. Now it is my honor to hand it over to Diane to get us started.
Great, thanks so much, Courtney, and hello, everybody. Welcome to today's kickoff webinar for Our Homes, Our Votes 2022. I'm so glad that many of you are joining us today for this important work. So Our Homes, Our Votes project is a nonpartisan civic engagement initiative to build the capacity of nonprofit organizations to register, educate, and mobilize more low-income renters and allies who care about affordable housing to be involved in voting. Low-income individuals and renters are significantly underrepresented among voters when compared to higher income individuals and homeowners. To ensure that affordable housing interests are addressed by candidates for public office, it's critical that organizations engage low-income renters and other low-income people in the voting process. So next slide, please. The project also seeks to elevate the affordable housing crisis and its solutions in the campaigns of all people seeking office at all levels. So in 2020, we did this through the Our Homes, Our Votes 2020 project to great success in the presidential campaign. Next slide, please. In 2020, Our Homes, Our Votes worked with key partners in Iowa, New Hampshire, and beyond to hold candidate town halls, coffees with the candidates, discussions at affordable housing developments or homeless encampments, and more. We educated candidates about the affordable housing challenges throughout the country, and we urged them to talk about their proposed solutions. Next slide. We placed multiple op-eds in national outlets and in frequently read papers in New Hampshire and in Iowa to further call the candidates' attention and to add more pressure for an adequate response. Next slide. And it worked. This is one example of an op-ed that I published and tweeted and then had multiple presidential candidates respond to. with their proposed solution to the crisis. Next slide. In the end, we worked really closely with all campaigns on both sides of the aisle, and we pushed around 15 Democratic candidates to put forward bold, ambitious plans to end homelessness and housing poverty. And this was remarkable, not only for the quantity of the plans, but also for their quality. In previous presidential campaigns, if candidates talked about housing at all, it was typically to make brief mention of homeownership for middle-class Americans. The presidential candidate plans of 2020 were markedly different. They centered the needs of the lowest income and the most marginalized people. They centered solutions for people experiencing homelessness and for the lowest income renters, as we urged them to do. Next slide, please. We also urged candidates to mention affordable housing in their speeches and in the presidential debates, whether or not they were asked a specific question about housing. And through our Homes Are Votes 2020, we made a major push for debate moderators to ask a specific question about affordable housing. And it worked. Our organizing and advocacy resulted in multiple candidates talking about affordable housing on the campaign trail, in the debates, and in having, for the first time in the history of televised presidential debates, having moderators at 2 debates ask the candidates for their plans on affordable housing. Next slide. So the result was a sea change. In previous presidential elections, many of us would be watching debates or speeches and hoping to hear occasionally the word, community or the word home. And then we would say, wow, they mentioned housing. We were really grasping at drops. And then in 2020, it looked like this. And we're going to play a short video for you.
We have a housing affordability crisis in this country. Today, too many families are spending more than half of their income on rent. And that means that more families are doubling up, sleeping on the couches of relatives, or even sleeping on the streets. But you know what? You hardly ever hear about that in politics. That's going to change.
Affordable housing. Homelessness. Affordable housing. And homelessness.
Affordable housing.
Homelessness.
And affordable housing.
Affordable housing.
Homelessness.
Affordable housing. Homelessness.
Of affordable housing.
Affordable housing. Affordable housing. Of affordable housing.
Affordable housing.
And my housing plan calls for the building of 7 million more affordable units in this country, and it calls for fully funding housing vouchers.
I go after those people who are involved in gentrification, because what's happening is we're moving people out of their neighborhoods in ways that in fact make no sense.
Our administration will double the federal spending on homelessness.
My plan has a refundable housing tax credit that would give over 80,000 people in New Hampshire, Granite Staters, it would give them tax credit between that and the area rents.
So I'm proposing that we invest $430 billion in making sure that more affordable housing gets built and making sure that families can better access things like tax credits and vouchers to support their ability to get a home.
But the National Housing Trust Fund was special because it was stood up in 2015 specifically to provide new revenue for people who are extremely low income, basically people who are making less than 30% of the area median income. And it started off very modestly at $173 million nationally. And that's nothing for the nation. That is a lot of money, but it's not when you consider the need.
One of the things I've proposed is a $120 billion federal investment in affordable housing.
On the issue of affordable housing and rent, I'm proposing that if folks are paying more than 30% of their income in rent plus utilities, they should get up to a $6,000 tax credit so they can afford to get through each month.
My policy from a state like yours that has not only we have a big city, but we also have a lot of rural areas and mid-sized cities, is making sure that that is not neglected in affordable housing.
Maintaining perpetually affordable housing. Perpetually affordable. All right, second of all, if you're going to end homelessness in America, you know what you're going to have to do? You're going to have to build low-income housing.
My plan
to deal with the housing crisis in the United States, to improve and increase the stock of affordable housing itself, to combat homelessness in the United States. Our homeless crisis is our housing crisis.
What can we do about it? I'll tell you exactly what we can do about it. We can build 3.2 million new housing units across this country. Urban, rural, we can do this.
So there's a lot we need to do. Certainly as president, I would invest in trying to increase the supply of affordable housing.
Mr. Steyer, millions of working Americans are finding that housing has become unaffordable, especially in metropolitan areas. It is particularly acute in your home state of California and places like Los Angeles and San Francisco. Why are you the best person to fix this problem?
When you look at inequality in the United States of America, you have to start with housing. We need to change policy, and we need to apply resources here to make sure that we build literally millions of new units.
Our housing problem in America is a problem on the supply side, and that means that the federal government stopped building new housing a long time ago, affordable housing. There are 3.2 million new housing units in America. Those are housing units for working families, for the working poor, for the poor, for seniors who want to age in place, for people with disabilities, for people who are coming back from being incarcerated.
If you're a renter who pays more than a third of your income in rent, then you will get a refundable tax credit between the amount you're paying and the area median rent.
How will your policies address and ensure affordable housing and education equity for minimum wage workers?
Thank you. This is one of the first times we've talked about housing. The way you do that is, first of all, taking care of the Section 8 backlog of applicants. There are literally hundreds of thousands of people waiting.
Housing. Homelessness.
Housing.
Homelessness.
Housing.
Homelessness.
Housing.
Homelessness.
Housing.
Homeless.
Housing.
I love that video so much. It just represents such extraordinary, really extraordinary progress that we collectively made through the Our Homes, Our Votes project. Such a sea change from barely hearing the word home in a presidential election to that. Really incredible. And of course, this obviously isn't a presidential election year, but we want to hear candidates, all candidates running for office at all levels, talking about affordable housing and their solutions to the same degree. Next slide, please. And we have so much more work to do also to engage, empower, enable renters and people who are homeless to register and get out the vote. So the reason is beyond the importance of breaking down obstacles to ensure that everyone can participate in democracy. Also, the reason is many of us have asked ourselves for years, what will it take to have policymakers prioritize the needs of low-income renters? And when you look at these numbers that are on the screen, it's obvious what it'll take. Today, low-income renters vote for a whole variety of reasons at much lower rates than higher income homeowners. Next slide, please. And the breakdown by income is even more stark. So when we look at these numbers, is it any wonder why federal housing policy skews so heavily towards higher income homeowners at the expense of low income renters? Until these numbers change, we won't be as successful as we need to be in having policymakers consistently prioritize the needs of the lowest income renters. But changing these numbers changes everything. So if you take one thing from today's webinar, I hope that it's this. All of us, each and every one of us working to achieve housing justice can and should engage in nonpartisan civic engagement. And the Our Homes, Our Votes project will provide you with the tools that you need to get it done. I hope that each of you will agree and see this work as a key part of all of our jobs and as essential to achieving our collective goals. So I'll stop there, Courtney, and I'll turn it back to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Diane. It's just incredible to see how the Our Homes, Our Votes campaign in 2020 just changed the conversation around housing. I haven't seen any audience questions submitted in the Q&A yet, but I did have one question that I wanted to ask, which is, how has our engagement in Our Homes, Our Votes 2020, how has that changed our relationships with elected officials and our ability to influence policy with those in office?
Yeah, it's a good question. It made a big difference for sure there too. I mean, obviously you saw some familiar faces in that video. Vice President Kamala Harris, when she was senator, introduced legislation for a renter's tax credit, which we had worked very closely with her office to have introduced as a senator, and really encouraged and urged her to talk about it on the campaign trail when she was a presidential candidate. And certainly she carries that with her now as vice president. Same with President Biden. He was the last to come out with his proposal for how he would address the affordable housing crisis, and he was noticeably late. And we were pushing and pushing for him to come out with it. And by the time he had, 14 other candidates had come out with very ambitious housing plans. So his was equally ambitious, and if not even more so. And certainly we've seen how he's now carried that into how he talks about housing as a human right, which is, I believe, the first president to talk about housing in that way, and to talk about the need for universal housing vouchers, which is something he committed to on the campaign trail. But also certainly all of the senators who remain in the Senate, who were running for president, we were able to deepen our relationships with them, deepen their understanding, and I think in many ways their commitment to affordable housing, that now they're carrying on as senators, like Senator Amy Klobuchar and Senator Gillibrand and others. So it was an important way for us to not only get the end results that we wanted, which was having the issue elevated in the campaigns, but certainly to deepen the relationships with these policymakers as well.
Thank you so much. And I'm seeing a lot of enthusiasm in the chat, a lot of people ready to go for 2022. So we're going to move on to our next speaker, but I know Diane will stay on the call and can probably answer further questions in the chat. All right, so one place that's really been in the spotlight when it comes to elections is Georgia. And we are so fortunate that our state partner, Georgia Advancing Communities Together, or Georgia ACT, has been at the forefront of voter engagement efforts in Georgia. I'm so honored to introduce Georgia ACT's president and CEO, Dr. Bambi Hayes-Brown, who's also an NLIHC board member, to talk about all the outstanding work that's being done in Georgia.
Yes, good day. Thank you all so much for having me. Hopefully you all can hear me okay. But yes, I'm Dr. Bambi Hayes-Brown, and I am with Georgia Advancing Communities Together. And we did receive a grant from the National Income Housing Coalition in 2019 for the Our Homes, Our Votes 2020 campaign. And of course, we had all these great ideas and things that we were going to do. And we had our state housing day at the Capitol. And we actually had staff from the National Income Housing Coalition to come down and present and talk about all these things. And then probably, I guess maybe 2-3 weeks later, COVID happened. And so we had to really just shut down and rethink and re-strategize how we wanted to do things, but we didn't take long. So it was around the springtime when we began to talk to our partners to see, what things they would like to do. So we started having virtual candidate forums, and there were some state as well as national candidate forums with our partners. Some were back to back. We had 8 in one day. I don't advise you to do that, but it was very, very good. Very good thing. And we had different Facebook Live sessions and all of those things with our partners. But I want to kind of talk about what we did that was somewhat outside of the box. We had a partner in Southwest Georgia called Sowega Rising, and the executive director of Sowega Rising introduced me to a Reverend Pharrell Malone with Fresh Communities, and they were doing some great work in Southeast Georgia in the Waycross area. And she said, "Hey, Bambi, I think you two should get to know each other, and because you're doing similar work and you're talking about doing voter engagement." So she introduced us, we put our heads together, and we came up with this 66 county tour. And so we actually toured 66 counties in Georgia, and they were primarily in southern Georgia, because we do and we recognize that there were so many agencies and even some of our partners. We did voter engagement work in Fulton County and DeKalb County, which has two of the greatest populations in Georgia. But we really want to focus on some of those communities that people really don't think about or pay much attention to. So we really focused our voter engagement efforts in southern Georgia, and specifically the Black rural voters. And so what we did was we set up this intricate network. I call it the Underground Railroad, where we had 5 counties. They were grouped in bunches. And so we did this in a matter of 2 weeks, believe it or not. And so we had a partner on the ground, and their job was to rally the people together. Reverend Malone had a bus that he had wrapped with voter material, thanks to Black Voters Matter and so many other partners. And we just started caravanning. And so as we started caravanning into these communities, we met with people, and guess what? The thing that always came up and during those community conversations was housing. And you could see that as you were coming into these communities, you were driving in, it's the first thing that you notice, because we didn't go to the courthouse or we didn't go to a community center. We actually physically went into the neighborhoods. We went into public housing units and areas where people were actually located. And you could see people actually walking to the bus, and they were wanting to get this information, and they were talking about the conditions of their housing and so much that they needed. And so I was like, wow, we gotta continue this work. And so of course, everything went of course, we are a nonpartisan organization. Let me put that out there. But we know what happened in Georgia in November of 2020. And then there was a runoff. So we had to do this work all over again. And we did, and we kept the 2 senators from Georgia. They were elected. But one of the things that I want to mention in going into the communities, not everyone was a fan of that. And so that's why we had to be very careful with our network. But there was one county in Southeast Georgia where the word got out, and we were met with counter caravanners that was honestly pretty hostile. But you know what? That was okay. We kept it moving. We did what we had to do. And as a result of that, we found out that people wanted us to come back. So in 2021, again, we partnered together and we did the 3V Liberation Tour: votes, vaccines, and vision. And so as a part of the vision component of these tours, we went into 42 cities, primarily in the rural communities in southern Georgia. And we had town hall meetings with individuals, with stakeholders, with faith-based leaders, with elected officials, and they were then looking for solutions. They were like, okay, well, what can we do? And it was just during that time when the National Income Housing Coalition came up with the House campaign. And so that's what we used when we were doing the town hall meetings in those 42 cities, was talking about the House campaign and those priorities that we need on the federal level, and also things that people can do on the state and on the local level. Because in 2021, we also had a lot of local elections. So after we finished up the 3V Liberation Tour, we went into those 42 cities and we gave people strategies and tools that they could use to help build affordable housing, help sustain affordable housing in their respective communities. Then we had our local elections that we partnered with Black Voters Matter and participated in the Collard Green Caucus to continue to register voters. So the work doesn't stop. We don't, as I always say, we don't have any off years. So here we are into 2022. And so we are partnering with Nonprofit Vote. We are getting our housing counseling agencies involved, because people, unfortunately, there are a lot of unaffordable places in Georgia, especially in Atlanta, and people are moving, people are being transient. And there are still some people that are buying houses, believe it or not. And when people come to those housing counseling agencies, we want them to register to vote because they're going to have a change of address if they have already registered and need to re-register in their new using their new addresses. So I think it's important that we, of course, continue to do the op-eds, continue to call your legislators, all of those things that we've been doing as a part of the National Income Housing Coalition. We just did with the policy forum, and we talked to both Republicans and Democrats. And what we found out is that once you drill down, they all want the same thing. Now, how they get there that's another discussion. But when we talk to Republican legislators, they talk about housing, they talk about affordable housing. Some may use the term workforce housing. It depends on where you are with the semantics. But hey, if you want to call it workforce housing, we'll use that term so that you listen to us. And so that's the thing. The most important thing is to get that conversation going. And people need to hear from more than just us advocates. We need to get our elected officials to hear from their constituents. And once their constituents start talking and demanding, then that's when we can see policy change. And we can advocate all day, but if we don't elect the right people in office, we're still just advocating and talking and pushing, and nothing is wrong with that. But that's why housing and these election efforts are so important, and they go hand in hand. And so I'll be glad to entertain any questions that you may have, because I could go on and on about all of the great work that we did.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bamby. I'm seeing a lot of enthusiasm in the chat, people who want to get involved in what you're doing. I haven't seen any specific questions, but there's one thing that I wanted to ask, which is, what are you most excited about for your work in 2022?
I think what I would say I'm most excited about is that now everyone is talking about affordable housing. When I started this work 25 years ago, nobody was talking about affordable housing. And then even prior to the pandemic, we were talking about affordable housing, but now everybody's talking about affordable housing. And so it's not just affecting low-income families. And we've had people who were medical doctors because we had a small rental assistance program. They came to us for rental assistance. And even landlords, believe it or not, we had some landlords that were really talking about this. Wow, I didn't really understand that affordable housing was an issue. And so that's what I think that really came out of this, and having that on the ground grassroots efforts that comes out of communities that are now really saying, okay, affordable housing affects all of us. So we need affordable housing for our community, especially for our low-income residents, for our senior citizens, veterans, children, all of the above. So that's what I would say would probably be the thing that I'm most excited about.
Great. And we did get some questions from the audience. I'll give you both of the questions right now because they kind of go together. The first is, were there particular challenges talking to housing counseling agencies, or were they generally on board with helping people register to vote? And also on the theme of obstacles you faced, could you talk a bit more about the hostility you encountered? And are there lessons learned from that others could plan for?
Yes, with the housing counselors, there was some resistance, and the resistance was not that they didn't want to participate, it's because they are severely underfunded. And so as we're advocating, I always say we need more funding for housing counseling agencies for them in order to continue and do the great work that they do. And I'm a former housing counselor, so I'm an advocate for housing counselors. So they really want to do the work, but it's just a matter of finding the time to incorporate those efforts, voting efforts, into their already busy schedules. And as it relates to obstacles, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you see it, we did have to get security. And so we did have to have security when we were coming into the communities. We really want to avoid that because sometimes there's a negative connotation with law enforcement and communities of color. But we really didn't see that as a significant barrier once we did get law enforcement and our private security involved, because depending on who you ask in that town that we went to with the hostility, some may say the law enforcement may have had something to do with that, but that's just being very, very, very honest and transparent. But we did wind up having to have some security, but that was in 2020. Now, when we did the 3V Liberation Tour, we didn't face any hostility. People from elected officials from all races, colors, creeds, from both sides of the aisle were really more open to talking about the housing challenges that they see in their communities.
For sure. Well, thank you so much for all of your hard work and persisting in what are certainly difficult and unanticipated circumstances, especially having a runoff immediately following all of your hard work for many months in 2020. And we're excited to see where everything continues to go. All right. Well, as I'm going to pass it along now to Jen Butler, NLHC's Senior Director of Media Relations and Communications, to preview the Our Homes, Our Votes communication strategy for 2022. I think we've really seen from Dr. Bambi and Diane's remarks that getting the word out to the public is such a critical part of all of this work.
Yes, definitely. Thank you, Courtney, and good afternoon. Today, I'm going to share our communication strategy and some of our outcomes from our 2020 campaign and what we're going to do to expand on it in our 2022 campaign. Oh, it looks like the slides are cut off just a bit. Okay. Hopefully you guys can see. I don't know why the slides appear to be cut off. First and foremost, Our Homes, Our Votes website is our one-stop shop for expanding registration and the turnout of low-income renters and affordable housing allies in the electoral process. On this site, you're going to see and find all the information and resources that your organization needs to plan and execute successful nonpartisan voter engagement mobilization. And essentially just everything from toolkits, templates, educational background, and essentially a blueprint for how to engage with voters and all candidates. During our 2020 campaign, we were successful in our communication strategy that integrated news media, outreach, paid media investment, and social media engagement. Diane mentioned this earlier. On November 20th, 2019, for the first time in memory, if not history, a moderator in the MSNBC hosted presidential debate asked candidates for their solutions to the nation's housing affordability crisis. So during this debate, NBC News White House correspondent asked, millions of Americans are finding that housing is becoming unaffordable. Why are you the best person to fix this problem? And this particular broadcast drew an average of 6.5 million viewers. And it was all a result of the sign-in letter that NLHC sent in advance to media outlets that were hosting the debates. And it was to advocate for the questions to be asked about affordable housing on the national debate stage. And that letter, of course, that led to this success was a sign-on letter that had over 1,000 sign-ons. Another notable mention ahead of the Democratic presidential debate in South Carolina, NLHC sent targeted messages to the moderators, reporters, and candidates, again, to ensure that affordable housing was prominently featured. And as a result of that debate's moderator, who was the host of CBS's 60 Minutes, asked the question, and that was shown in the video earlier, how will your policy address and ensure affordable housing and education equity for minimum wage workers? And that broadcast drew an audience of more than 13 million viewers. And so, and again, I'm not sure why the whole slide is not showing up here, but if anyone wants to see the every slide and its true presence. I don't know why it's kind of cut off here. We can make sure that we make that available. NLHC also utilized news media with a paid ad investment. On December 17th, 2019, we placed a full page ad in the LA Times, and it was a targeted campaign ad, and it yielded a reach of 1.2 million daily print readers. So in addition to earned media, paid media is also very important, especially when you're wanting to generate visibility, high visibility for your campaign. In addition to NLIHC's branded social handles, our Homes, Our Votes has, of course, their own social platforms that if you aren't already, we really encourage you to follow, amplify, and engage with. On social, we're able to elevate the successful news traction from our sign-on letters and debate features, and we're able to achieve essentially overall increased visibility for affordable housing as a critical political issue. In social, we amplify the work and successes of all of our partners and our stakeholders. An example that Diane mentioned earlier was one of her tweets from her nationally published op-ed that was retweeted by several members of Congress. And this is just another example of how we're leading that social conversation. We also publish monthly newsletters that feature candidate events, campaign news, relevant articles, the work of the Housing Provider Council and state grantees on the local level. We highlight our state partners, such as Dr. Bambi Hayes-Brown with Georgia Act, who you just heard from, and the op-eds that they were able to place on the importance of affordable housing being front and center during elections. And our recipient base for our monthly newsletters is over 160,000 recipients. As I mentioned earlier, on our Homes, Our Votes website, you can find our toolkits, which are super important for mobilization. Much like any of our other campaigns, we provide these toolkits. And this particular, our website, we provide not only toolkits, but legal and political guides for voter and candidate engagement, and even media engagement as well. And each of these toolkits, much like all of our campaign toolkits, provide sample language, shareable, visual content, and templates. And central and most important, however, to our campaign and its success is our activation with each and every community. The success of the 2020 campaign and the future successes of this campaign is reflective and is going to be reflective of the vested interests of our communities in achieving affordable housing through the ballots. So we're going to lead not just by our fellow housing advocates or even our congressional champions, but the resident leaders and the community leaders and residents with lived experiences. We need for the campaign to amplify voices and purposeful action, essentially that lead to engagement and voting. And so on both our Homes, Our Votes and our main NLIHC website, you can find, and also these webinars as well that we really want to encourage attendance and registration for. You can find, again, those tools and guidance on how you can get involved on your local level in your communities. We love to see it, and we look forward to your partnership in these successful campaigns. And again, I can't apologize enough that these slides are not showing. Like I said, if you want to see them in their entirety, we'll make sure that we can make those available. Apologies for this technical difficulty here. But thank you. If you have any questions, please do reach out at jbutler@nlihc.org.
Thank you so much, Jen. We have a request for hard copy. Yeah, Claudia, I can connect with you about that for sure. And I haven't seen any other questions come in, but I think Jen will be on the call if anyone wants to ask any questions in the chat. Great. So next up, again, if you're here today or if you've been tuning in for the whole call, you probably at this point have a good sense that housing justice and political participation are connected. While, as Diane mentioned in her opening, while 71% of homeowners voted in the 2020 general elections, only 55% of renters did, and we see an even greater disparity in voter turnout between high-income and low-income citizens. But new research from Eviction Lab actually suggests that there's even more to the connection between housing justice and political participation than we previously knew. And to discuss this research, I'm excited to introduce Jillian Slee, a researcher at Eviction Lab, to discuss the latest on the connection between eviction rates and voter turnout.
Thank you so much for the introduction. I'm delighted to join today's call and to share a brief overview of results from a recent study that I conducted with my colleague, Matt Desmond. So the United States is at a critical juncture. Housing has become more and more expensive to the point of being unreachable for many. And at the same time, some policymakers are making it harder to vote and participate in our democracy. In this study, we sought to understand the answers to two key questions. First, does eviction affect voter turnout? And second, how do the political effects of eviction vary across different community contexts? To carry out this study, we merged two very large data sets. We used the Eviction Lab's data on court-ordered evictions and eviction filings from 2013 to 2015, and Labels and Lists data on registered voters turnout in the 2016 presidential election. For this study, we defined neighborhoods as census tracts, and our main analyses focus on a sample of just over 7,000 communities in 19 states. So first, using linear regression techniques, we find eviction plays a powerful role in depressing community voter turnout. Fewer people turn out to vote in communities where there has been forced displacement through evictions. A 1 percentage point increase in the residential eviction rate predicts a 0.46 percentage point drop in the voter turnout rate. This is true even after accounting for factors like poverty, racial makeup, the percentage of renter households, and other factors known to affect both eviction and voting. Notably, the eviction filing rate has a small and statistically imprecise effect on voting, suggesting that displacement itself is more consequential for voting rather than the threat alone of eviction. In additional analyses, our finding that eviction depresses voter turnout holds in urban and rural neighborhoods, in communities located in states with new voting requirements, in uncompetitive states, and in neighborhoods with more or less exposure to eviction, although the size of eviction's influence does vary. In fact, in some community contexts, the effect of eviction is estimated to be much larger. Notably, in neighborhoods located in states with same-day or election day registration, as well as in those located in battleground states, eviction's connection with voter turnout is small and imprecisely estimated. Last, I wanted to highlight that we examined a data set using eviction rates from 2015 in the year before the 2016 election alone, and we reconfirmed our findings. We observe eviction's influence to be modestly larger. A 1 percentage point increase in the eviction rate predicts a 0.56 percentage point drop in the voter turnout rate. So our findings raise questions about how eviction depresses voter turnout. So I'd like to highlight two key hypotheses. Past research finds eviction enhances material hardship and social isolation. Consequently, we theorize that eviction may depress voter turnout because individuals necessarily prioritize urgent human needs like shelter. And these effects may spill over if neighbors extend resources like housing and shelter, money, or caregiving support, and consequently strain their own resources. Additionally, eviction enhances social isolation and disrupts local networks. This is a problem because strong community ties can otherwise bolster political participation. Okay. Our study demonstrates a clear link between housing and the ballot box. Eviction has a powerful negative influence on voting in American neighborhoods. Our findings suggest more people would vote if stably housed. Additionally, while we stress the need for further research on key voting policies, our findings tentatively suggest that same-day and election day registration may mitigate eviction's influence. On the other hand, new voter restrictions and the absence of same-day registration appear to strengthen eviction's depressive influence. We show when America votes, housing insecurity matters. Policymakers and organizers should therefore invest in housing and voter policies that promote stability and inclusion. Specifically, policymakers can invest in interventions aimed at reducing eviction, such as by supporting the civil right to counsel and expanding much needed access to rental assistance. And policymakers can also work to remove barriers to the ballot box, especially those that could disproportionately harm communities enduring housing insecurity. Additionally, community organizations may target voter mobilization and grassroots efforts in neighborhoods affected by eviction. If you'd like to delve in deeply, read all the numbers, and gain insight into the methodology, I know that the link to the article has been shared in the chat. In the broader study, for example, we also employed a causal identification, instrumental variable strategy, along with a generalized additive model. If you're interested in sharing a high-level summary of the research, we also have a blog post on the Eviction Lab website that's been shared in the chat. Thank you so much for your time, and please feel free to reach out to me with any questions or to put them in the Q&A.
Thank you so much, Jillian. This research is just so powerful and I think underscores the importance of everything that advocates have been doing. I was curious if this research has been getting any sort of responses from academics or other elected officials, and if there have been kind of conversations about what comes next out of this?
So far, we've heard from some tenants who have been affected by eviction and have thought through their own voter re-registration process. And we've heard from other folks that are interested in advocating for both housing and voting policy changes and interventions. And I'm eager and excited to see what follows in the future.
Great, and feel free to connect us with anyone you've been talking to. We'd love to get more people who are doing this work involved with the campaign. Great. So moving on, as Jillian's research makes clear, there is this really devastating feedback loop between housing injustice and lack of voter participation. And to break that cycle, we need to organize, and we also need policy change. Another critical component of the Our Homes, Our Votes campaign is advocacy for the Our Homes, Our Votes Act, a bill that would facilitate voter registration for residents of federally subsidized properties and through PHAs. And to discuss this bill, we have a special message from the bill's lead sponsor, Representative Chuy Garcia of Illinois. And we have a link in the chat to the bill if you want to review the text.
Good afternoon, National Low Income Housing Coalition. Thanks so much for having me on to talk with you about the Our Homes, Our Votes Act. I'm Congressman Jesus Chuy Garcia, and I represent the 4th District of Illinois, including the northwest and southwest sides of Chicago and parts of suburban Cook County. I can't join you now because I'm on a plane to Washington, but I know some of my friends from the Fight for Fair Affordable Housing in Illinois are in the meeting. I thank them for their work, and I'm excited to fight together to pass this bill in Congress. I introduced the Our Homes, Our Votes Act for a single reason. Renters, and especially tenants in affordable housing, are shut out of the political system. These potential voters are disenfranchised and left out. But tenants in public and affordable housing have already verified their identity and their address to local authorities, the exact information they need to register to vote. Today, when you go to the DMV for a driver's license, you can check a box and the DMV sends your paperwork along to register to vote in your state. It makes sense. If you filled out the forms, you proved your identity to the state. Why make it harder? That's thanks to the National Voter Registration Act of 1993, known as the Motor Voter Bill. It's a great idea, but we can't stop there. Driving a car doesn't give you an extra voice in our government. My bill allows tenants to register to vote as they fill out rental paperwork with their housing authority and asks private landlords of affordable housing to provide tenants with information about how they registered to vote. Democracy means an equal voice. We know how our country often falls short of that equal voice by limiting access to the ballot, by drawing districts to disenfranchise our communities, even through the Senate and Electoral College. By removing unnecessary barriers that eligible tenants in affordable housing face to register to vote, this bill takes a small step toward equal access at the ballot box. Renters need a voice in our democracy. Tenants in public housing need a voice in our democracy. Let's make it easier, not harder, for them to vote. Thank you for all your work.
We are so grateful to Representative Garcia for his leadership on this bill, and we want to get as many members of Congress on board as possible. We have an action tool that you can use. We'll have a link to that in the chat momentarily that you can use to send your members of Congress a letter and urge them to co-sponsor this important bill. And before we close out, I want to encourage everyone to explore the wealth of resources on the Our Homes, Our Votes website, as Jen previewed for us. The Voter and Candidate Engagement Guide, which you can find on the website homepage, compiles all of the most useful tools, tips, and templates that you can use to launch your voter and candidate engagement campaigns. And we'll have time in future weeks to dig more into the specific resources and walk through every aspect of launching your campaign and continuing as we move closer towards election season. But if you're browsing the resources and you have any questions, you can always reach out to us at ourhomes@nlihc.org. And finally, I hope that we'll see everyone at our next webinar, which will be held 2 weeks from now on Monday, April 18th. This webinar will walk through every aspect of a strong voter and candidate engagement campaign, encompassing voter registration, voter education, get out the vote, candidate engagement, and ballot measure advocacy. One of our close partners on the campaign, Caitlin Donnelly from Nonprofit Vote, will provide tips for organizations to assess their capacity, build partnerships, set goals, and secure funding that will enable them to carry out their plans effectively. And don't forget that the Our Homes, Our Votes webinars will be in rotation with the bi-weekly housed national calls on universal, stable, and affordable housing. So make sure that you register for next week's house call. And we'll have the link to that registration in the chat, and you'll get that in your email within the next few days as well. So thank you all for being here. We're just so excited for this launch, for everything that's to come in the upcoming weeks and months. And I'll stick around in case anyone has any remaining questions. You can drop those in the chat or the Q&A. Thank you so much, and thank you to all of our incredible panelists.